Everyone expected House of the Dragon to change a few things from Fire and Blood. That's the reality of adapting a fictional history book into a television drama. Battles get rearranged, characters receive more screen time, and conversations that never existed in the source material become some of the show's most memorable scenes. But Season 3 Episode 2 made a change that feels much bigger than simply moving events around. Instead of giving Otto Hightower the quiet, almost clinical execution described by George R.R. Martin, the series places him face-to-face with the woman whose life he spent trying to dismantle. And then, in one of the most shocking moments of the episode, Rhaenyra Targaryen becomes his executioner. At first glance, it looks like the writers simply wanted a more dramatic scene. But the deeper you examine this moment, the more it becomes clear that Otto's death wasn't changed for shock value. It was changed because the story itself has changed. Hidden inside this execution are clues about Rhaenyra's future, Alicent's greatest failure, and the kind of queen Westeros is about to receive. In fact, once you connect everything the episode quietly reveals, Otto's death stops feeling like the end of his story and starts feeling like the beginning of most dangerous transformation. Before we dive into all of those details, if you enjoy breaking down every hidden clue, adaptation change, and piece of George R.R. Martin's lore, make sure you're subscribed. Every script on this channel is researched from scratch, written by hand, and built around the details that are easy to miss the first time you watch an episode. If that's your kind of content, joining the community really helps the channel continue making these deep dives and reach more fans of House of the Dragon. And with that said, this is your spoiler warning. We'll be discussing major events from Season 3, Episode 2, along with important moments from Fire and Blood, so if you haven't caught up yet, now's the time to pause the video. The biggest clue is that the show didn't simply change how Otto dies, it changed who delivers justice. That distinction matters far more than it first appears. In Fire and Blood, Otto's execution is recorded almost like an entry in an official document. The Maester explains that Sir Otto Hightower, who had served 3 kings as Hand, was among the first to be beheaded after Rhaenyra reclaimed King's Landing. The event is important because of its political consequences, not because of its emotional impact. That's how Fire and Blood tells nearly every major event. It presents history from a distance, allowing readers to piece together motives through conflicting accounts and fragmented records. George R.R. Martin deliberately avoids lingering on emotional details because the book isn't written like a traditional novel. It's written like history, where even life-changing moments can be reduced to a single sentence in an archive. Television works very differently. A camera cannot simply tell audiences that someone important died and expect years of emotional investment to disappear with a narrator's voice. Otto Hightower has been one of the defining forces behind this story since the very first episode. Long before swords were drawn and dragons filled the skies, Otto was quietly reshaping the future of the realm from the small council chamber. Every calculated conversation, every political marriage, every carefully chosen lie moved Westeros one step closer to civil war. He didn't need to wield a sword because influence was always his greatest weapon. While Daemon inspired fear through unpredictability, Otto controlled kingdoms through patience. He understood that the most effective victories often happened before armies ever marched. Looking back, Otto wasn't simply serving the Iron Throne, he was redesigning it. From encouraging Alicent's marriage to Viserys, to steadily undermining Rhaenyra's position as heir, to building support for Aegon's claim behind closed doors, Otto spent decades creating the political machine that eventually became the Green faction. He rarely appeared emotional, because emotion wasn't useful to him. Everything was strategy. Everything was calculation. Even his love for his family often seemed filtered through the question of how it could strengthen House Hightower's influence. That cold, deliberate approach made him one of the most fascinating characters in the series because he never saw himself as a villain. From Otto's perspective, he was preserving stability. He believed strong institutions mattered more than individual feelings. The tragedy is that his pursuit of order helped create the greatest chaos Westeros had experienced since Aegon's conquest. That history explains why the writers couldn't allow Otto to disappear through a quick execution carried out by an anonymous headsman. After 3 seasons of watching him manipulate kings, queens, councils, and even his own daughter, audiences needed something more personal. More importantly, Rhaenyra needed something more personal. The show revealed this long before she ever reached King's Landing. Every major loss she has suffered can be traced directly or indirectly, back to the political decisions Otto set into motion years earlier. The conflict between the Blacks and the Greens didn't begin because of one misunderstanding. It began because Otto refused to accept a future in which Rhaenyra inherited the Iron Throne. That single choice reshaped an entire generation. Luke's death, the destruction of the realm, the loss of Jace, and the endless cycle of revenge all grew from seeds Otto helped plant. This explains why her execution of Otto feels less like revenge and more like a verdict. She isn't simply killing the former hand of the king. She's ending the life of the man who spent decades trying to erase her claim before she ever had the chance to prove herself. Hidden in this scene is the realization that Rhaenyra isn't striking down a prisoner. She's striking down the architect of the war itself. That doesn't mean Otto is solely responsible for everything that followed. The Dance of the Dragons is far too complicated for one man to carry all the blame. But the writers clearly want viewers to understand that Otto's influence reached into every corner of this conflict. By placing the sword in Rhaenyra's hands, the show transforms a historical execution into an intensely personal reckoning. The scene also reveals something equally important about Rhaenyra herself. Throughout the series, she has fought to defend her birthright, but she has rarely been defined by open acts of brutality. Even when she embraced war, there remained a distinction between giving orders and personally spilling blood. Season 3, Episode 2 erases that distinction. The woman who once argued for restraint now delivers judgment herself, standing before the court not only as queen, but as executioner. That image carries enormous symbolic weight because rulers in Westeros understand that public executions are never just about punishment, they are declarations of power. Every witness in that room leaves with the same message. The queen who has reclaimed King's Landing will not separate justice from vengeance if she believes the realm demands both. And that's where the episode quietly plants its most unsettling idea. Otto's execution satisfies years of anger, but it doesn't bring peace. It doesn't heal grief. It doesn't return the sons Rhaenyra has lost or undo the betrayals that shattered her family. Instead, it marks the moment grief becomes policy. The line between necessary justice and personal vengeance begins to blur, and once that happens, history tells us the road ahead becomes far darker than anyone inside the Red Keep realizes. If Otto's execution had only been about giving viewers a satisfying moment after years of manipulation, the scene would have ended the instant his body hit the floor. Instead, the writers allow the consequences of that decision to linger, because the execution is really about everyone watching it. Ren isn't speaking only to Otto. She's speaking to the nobles who once questioned her legitimacy, the guards who must now decide where their loyalty belongs, the small folk who have lived through one king after another, and perhaps most importantly, to Alicent Hightower. That is the hidden purpose behind changing Otto's death. The execution becomes political theater, but not in the theatrical sense of spectacle. It's a carefully calculated message that the old order has ended, and the woman it spent decades trying to remove now holds absolute authority. Looking back, this scene carries an entirely different meaning, because the sword isn't just ending a life. It's severing the political system Otto spent his entire career building. That makes Alicent's role in the episode even more heartbreaking. Throughout the fall of King's Landing, she believes there is still a path that avoids unnecessary bloodshed. Her decision to surrender the city reflects a woman who has finally accepted that endless war will destroy everything she once claimed to protect. Earlier in the series, Alicent often believed compromise was weakness, but years of loss have stripped away that certainty. She has buried family members, watched the realm descend into chaos, and seen ambition consume nearly everyone around her. By opening the gates, she isn't admitting defeat as much as she's acknowledging reality. The Greens cannot hold King's Landing forever. Every additional death only deepens wounds that may never heal. Yet the episode quietly confirms one of the cruelest truths in George R.R. Martin's world. Peace almost always arrives too late, because while Alicent is trying to save what remains of her family, Rhaenyra has already reached a very different conclusion. The Queen understands that allowing Otto Hightower to live would create its own danger. A man who spent decades manipulating kings from behind the scenes doesn't suddenly become harmless because he's sitting in a prison cell. Otto's greatest weapon was never his title as Hand of the King. It was his ability to influence people, to build alliances, and to convince ambitious men that their interests aligned with his own. Even imprisoned, Otto remains a symbol. He represents the political movement that denied Rhaenyra's birthright, crowned Aegon, and plunged Westeros into civil war. Leaving him alive risks turning him into a rallying point for anyone still hoping the Greens can reclaim power. That practical reality gives the execution a strategic purpose, but the show refuses to let strategy overshadow emotion. Instead, it blends the two together so completely that separating justice from revenge becomes almost impossible. The writers wanted us to notice another subtle contrast hidden inside the takeover of King's Landing. Otto faces Rhaenyra without armies, titles, or influence. For the first time in the entire series, words cannot save him. That's remarkable because language has always been Otto's greatest strength. Time and again, he won battles through persuasion instead of violence. He convinced Viserys to reconsider his decisions. He guided the small council through carefully chosen arguments. He shaped Alicent's understanding of duty, succession, and family. Even when facing opponents like Daemon, Otto relied on composure rather than aggression. But standing before Rhaenyra, none of those talents matter anymore. Politics has finally reached the point where persuasion no longer holds value. The Civil War has entered its most dangerous stage, where swords replace speeches and dragons replace diplomacy. Otto spent decades believing every crisis could be managed through careful planning. His death becomes the ultimate reminder that even the greatest strategist eventually reaches a moment where strategy runs out.